Welcome back to the official sugar detox series. Last time we talked all about how you can use protein to naturally suppress your sugar cravings. So if you missed part 2, make sure you check that out. I'll have it linked down in the description below, as well as the full sugar detox playlist. But this time we're talking about the other two main food groups, carbohydrates and fat, and how these two, when used the right way, can help to naturally stop your sugar addiction, but also how when they're used the wrong way can actually promote your sugar addiction. Let's dive into it. My name's Autumn. I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's in nutrition human performance. Now, first let's talk about fats, because fats are actually really similar to protein in the sense that it helps to promote satiety. Feeling full and satisfied is one of the most important tenets to actually stopping your sugar addiction for good. Fat helps to raise our satiety hormone cholecystokinin, whereas protein helps to raise the hormone peptide YY. So they really work hand in hand, and when you have enough of both, you can really help to stop those hunger feelings and stop sugar cravings. But on the flip side, too little fat can actually promote hunger and not satisfy you. Now, within the carbohydrate umbrella, you have the fiber-rich foods. These fiber-rich foods act on our really short-term sense of satiety. So it literally acts on like our stretch hormone within our stomach to tell our brain like that we're full, we're satisfied, and we don't need to keep eating. Now, fiber without protein and fat doesn't work because it only makes you feel full as long as it's literally physically in your stomach. So as soon as it leaves your stomach and goes into the small intestine, you don't feel full anymore. So that's why we want to pair the long-term satiety of protein and fat with the short-term of fiber, and especially soluble fiber. Soluble fiber has been found to delay gastric emptying, so it takes a little bit longer for that food to leave your stomach and enter into the small intestine, which helps you feel fuller longer, and it also helps to stabilize blood sugar. So that was something else we talked about in the last 2 videos in this series, how a stable blood sugar level is really important for preventing sugar cravings. Soluble fiber is in a lot of different carbohydrate foods, as well as even some fat and protein foods like chia seeds, avocado, Brussels sprouts, sweet potato, broccoli, apples, carrots, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, and a lot of others. But then there's also the starches. Starches are foods that are a little bit more dense in carbohydrates, or in some cases a lot more dense in carbohydrates, and require a couple more additional steps to break down versus just simple carbohydrates like sugar. So an example of whole food sources of starches would be things like beans, corn, sweet potato, and some squash. But it's still important to remember that they still break down into sugar. All carbohydrates do that, other than fiber. This is where you want to be really strategic on if and when you're going to use starches, depending on your goals. So for example, if you're really active and if your muscles need that additional recovery, adding in some of these medium glycemic starches, like the ones that I just listed, can actually be really helpful for aiding in better recovery. Plus, in these circumstances, having some higher quality starches can even improve sleep quality, which, as we'll learn in the next video in this series, is equally as important when it comes to preventing sugar cravings. Now, if you're insulin resistant or if you're very carb sensitive, then having these starches is probably not a good idea for you, or at least right now. When someone is insulin resistant or carbohydrate sensitive, they don't tolerate these starches as well as someone else. So as a result, they get a really big blood sugar spike, similar to what they might have from even some refined carbohydrates or sugars. And as you know from the previous videos in this series, that results in a huge blood sugar crash, which just spikes more and more cravings. So if you are insulin resistant or carbohydrate sensitive, then you will want to stick with more of the non-starchy carbohydrates to help stabilize blood sugar levels. These would be pretty much anything that's not the items that I just listed. So all of the leafy greens, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, carrots, asparagus, artichoke, which is something I've personally been like obsessed with lately, zucchini, spinach, lettuce, and so many others. So clearly you need to know if you're actually carb sensitive or not, because that's going to be a big factor in determining whether or not you should be using those starchy carbohydrates. You can do this in a couple of different ways. You can either get a fasted insulin test from your doctor, or if you just want to get a rough idea, I do have a free carb sensitivity quiz that you can check out. I'll have linked down in the description below. Now, something that is so important to consider is that starches can act like sugars. Some starches break down really quickly and have a really big impact on the blood sugar level, whereas others have a much lesser impact. Typically speaking, the whole food sources of starches like corn, sweet potato, beans, lentils, etc., those tend to have more more of a medium glycemic response for most people, unless you're insulin resistant. However, it's these starches that have gone through processing that have almost like exponentially higher glycemic loads. So this includes things like most flours, even the healthier flours like cassava flour or corn flour, tapioca starch, and then of course potato chips, crackers, most breads, wheat-based wraps, pretty much every type of like baked good there is. In the powdered form, starches are going to have a much higher impact on blood sugar level than in the non-powdered form. And this makes sense because it's broken down already. It's gone through some degree of digestion by being ground up, so it can be absorbed a lot faster. The starches are broken down a lot faster, and it raises your blood sugar level a lot faster. Just to give you an idea, corn, which is something that most people, especially if you typically eat a lower carbohydrate diet, tend to shy away from, but just whole corn has a glycemic load of anywhere between 8 and 15, depending on the type you're using, which is either considered low or medium glycemic. But corn flour, which is used in things like tortilla chips or making tortillas, that has a glycemic load of 53, which is like mind-blowingly large. And just as a refresher, anything above 20 is considered a high glycemic load. So this is like more than double that high glycemic load number. It's still corn, it's just gone through that extra processing, and that makes all the difference. So when in doubt, stick with the whole food sources of starches if you are using them, and stay away from the powdered forms. Now, another factor we need to talk about that can make or break your results is how these fats and carbs are combined. In other words, we want to avoid something called the bliss point, because we already know sugar is addictive on its own. Anyone who's tried to just quit sugar in the past can know this to be true, but especially when you combine fat and sugar together, it has this crazy impact on our brain that bypasses normal satiety and tells our brain to just keep eating more and more and more. And this is called the bliss point. And you typically see this with more refined types of fats and sugars. So in things like ice cream, pastries, donuts, etc. These foods not only tend to have that mix of fat and sugar that can cause that bliss point, but they also tend to be really, really low in protein. So you get zero satiety factor from the protein aspect. Avoiding this bliss point is so crucial when you're looking to break your sugar addiction, because it literally can cause that addictive spiral within the brain from combining those fats and sugars. So especially during this sugar detox time, if you're already avoiding the floury types of food products that we discussed earlier, then avoiding this bliss point should be pretty easy, because you're not going to be eating things like cookies, pastries, pies. But you also need to watch out for some of those sneakier like health food items. One of the common ones I see are the keto treats, which keto is going to have a naturally higher fat amount. And technically speaking, they usually don't have sugar or not very much, but they do use high amounts of hyper-palatable zero sugar sweeteners. And I found that these zero sugar sweeteners, especially used in high hyper-palatable amounts, where they're just really, really sweet, when still paired with that higher fat intake, like in things like keto ice cream, can still cause a similar bliss point issue. So these are the fats and carbs that we really want to focus on when we're trying to detox away from our sugar addiction. And we're looking at whole food sources of each of these. For fats, we're looking at things like avocados, olives, pumpkin seeds, full fat, unsweetened dairy products like Greek yogurt, cheese, sour cream, ghee, butter, olive oil, fats naturally found in proteins like beef and chicken, almonds, peanuts, and coconut. For carbs, we're looking for the low to medium glycemic carbohydrates, specifically from whole food products. So this includes things like fresh berries, acai, sweet potato, butternut squash, zucchini, jicama, broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, artichoke, plum, kiwi, lentils if tolerated, leafy greens, and sprouts. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just to give you some ideas of what you can start to incorporate, but these also need to be balanced for your carb sensitivity. I do have a full blog post that lists out a visual of these medium to low glycemic carbohydrates. If you guys want to check that out, I will have it linked down in the description below. So far, we've covered a lot of tools, but we have two more really important tools that can really nip this sugar addiction in the bud. So if you aren't subscribed already, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Otherwise, if you're watching this video after these have gone live, you can check out the full sugar detox playlist down in the description below. All right, guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.